On the 19th of April 1894, most of the royal families of Europe gathered at Schloss Arenberg in Coburg for the wedding of Queen Victoria's grandchildren, Princess Victoria Melita and Prince Ernest Louis of Hesse. The wedding was also significant, since at the same time the official engagement of the future Tsar Nicholas II of Russia to Ernst's younger sister, Alix, was proclaimed. Little did the young royal couples know that less than 10 years later the lives of their families would be shattered by a common tragedy. While Nicholas and Alexandra were well known for their mutual love and devotion to each other, Victoria and Ernst's relationship was unhappy right from the start. The young couple had loud, physical fights. The volatile Victoria shouted, threw tea trays, smashed china against the wall, and tossed anything that was handy at Ernest during their arguments. Their daughter Elizabeth, who they nicknamed Ella, was born in 1895. Princess Victoria Melita was 18 at the time of Elizabeth's birth. She was fond of the baby, but found it hard to compete with Ernest's devotion to their daughter. Her husband was convinced even before Elizabeth could speak, that he alone could understand her. At the age of 6 months, she was scheduled to move to a new nursery and her father consulted her on her color preferences. He claimed that she made happy little squeals when he showed her a particular shade of lilac material. Ernst then decorated her nursery in shades of lilac. He later had a playhouse built for his daughter that stood in its own garden. Adults were forbidden to enter, much to the frustration of royal nurses and tutors, who could be seen pacing up and down impatiently outside as they waited for their high-spirited young charges to stop their games and emerge. Little Princess was a favorite with her great-grandmother, Queen Victoria, who called the little girl "my precious." The Queen was saddened by the marital problems of her grandchildren, but she refused to permit Victoria and Ernst to divorce, for the sake of Elizabeth. It was little Ella, whom the Queen asked to see first and to receive 80th birthday greetings from in 1899. When the child heard Victoria's pony cart approaching on the road below Windsor Castle, the 4-year-old Elizabeth ran out on the balcony, waving and calling, "Granny, Gran, I'm here." Elizabeth's playfulness made the Queen laugh out loud. The girl's maternal grandmother brought 5-year-old Elizabeth to see Queen Victoria on her deathbed on the 22nd of January 1901. After the Queen died, the child was taken in to see her body and told that her great-grandmother had gone to be with the angels. "But I don't see the wings," Elizabeth whispered. During Queen Victoria's funeral, Elizabeth sat next to her second cousin, Prince Edward of York, who later would become King Edward VIII in 1936. "Sweet little David behaved so well during the service," wrote his Aunt Maud, and was supported by the little Hesse girl, who took him under her protection and held him most of the time round his neck. They looked such a delightful little couple. In October 1901, after the death of Queen Victoria, Elizabeth's parents finally divorced. Her parents' divorce meant that little Ella divided her year between Darmstadt and her mother's new home in Coburg. Elizabeth was at first mistrustful of her mother and resented her parents' separation. Victoria tried to mend her relationship with her daughter during her visit with Elizabeth in the spring of 1902. However, she was only partially successful, though she enjoyed turning her daughter into an outstanding horsewoman. Ella's father told that he had difficulty persuading her to visit her mother. Before one visit, he found the child whimpering under a sofa, full of despair. He tried to assure Elizabeth that her mother loved her too. "Mama only says that she loves me, but you do love me," was the child's reply. On the 6th of October 1903, Ernst hosted a large family gathering at Darmstadt for the wedding of his niece, Princess Alice of Battenberg, to Prince Andrew of Greece and Denmark. Miss Egar, the Romanov girl's nanny, described the events that followed the wedding in her memories. "My children were delighted to see their cousin Ella once more. This dear child was then between 8 and 9 years old, and very like her beautiful mother in appearance. But the child's eyes had ever a look of fate in them. Looking at her, I used to wonder what those wide grey-blue eyes saw to bring such a look of sadness to the childish face. There is a modern picture of a Madonna and child, and the Virgin's eyes might have been painted from that child's, so full of the future sorrow do they seem. In spite of this look of intense sadness in her eyes, the little princess herself was full of life and happiness. I never saw so sunny a nature. I never saw the child out of temper, nor cross, and should any little dispute arise amongst my 4 charges, she would settle it with perfect amiability and justice, making whoever was the most in the wrong give in, and reproving with great gentleness the others. Where Princess Ella was, no angry disputes could exist. She was so sweet and just, that the other children always gave in to her arbitration. Looking back on her short life, I often wonder why we did not see that she was quite too good for this world. Her fit companions were the angels. It was a pretty sight to see her riding with the 2 eldest cousins in the riding school. She mounted on a great white horse, and her cousins on little ponies. She rode wonderfully well, and would take either of the little ones before her on the saddle, and give them a ride round the school. After the wedding was over and the guests gone, we went out to Wolfsgarten and were very happy there during the fine autumn weather. The Empress bought bicycles for her 3 eldest children, and they had grand rides with their cousin about the place. They hunted the woods for mushrooms, of which many varieties are found in Germany, and had various excursions. Our pleasant days in Wolfsgarten drew to a close, and we went to Skierniewice, in Poland, taking the Grand Duke of Hesse and his little daughter with us. She always enjoyed life so much, and she ran and bicycled about the gloomy old park, took the lead in all the games, and was like a sunbeam. I got some of the men to erect a swing and a giant stride for the children, and a great surprise had been prepared for them in the shape of a little carriage drawn by a pair of tame deer. So their mornings were passed pleasantly. One day Princess Ella and Tatiana were wonderfully busy and mysterious, running in and out of the rooms, and exploding into laughter every now and then. In the evening, after they were in bed, Tatiana took from under her pillow a little box, which dear cousin Ella had prepared for her. This contained some little colored stones which they had picked out of the gravel the day before, some bits of matches, luminous ends, of course, the sandpaper off a matchbox, and some tissue paper. This was a toy which they had prepared. After Tatiana was in bed, if she felt lonely, she was to sit up in bed, light a match upon the sandpaper, set fire to the tissue paper, and by its light to play with the stones. Needless to say, that could not be allowed, and the poor little princess was overwhelmed, when I explained to her that they might all have been burned in their beds. One evening, when the game was laid out, Princess Ella's English nurse Miss Wilson said to me, "I should so much like to show my baby this, it would interest her." We got blankets and shawls and prepared a warm little nest for her in the window seat, and brought her from her bed, wrapped in a dressing gown and shawl, to see the wonderful sight. She was quite delighted, and everyone came to the window and talked to her through it for a minute. Upon learning about the night adventure next morning, the Grand Duchess Olga was disposed to grumble at having been left in bed all night, and said to me, "Ella is only 8 months older than I am, and Miss Wilson took her up to see it all, and you left me in bed, like a baby." The little princess said so sweetly, "Oh, dear Olga, don't be angry, you will often see it again, but I shall never again see it." She so often made use of this expression, "I shall never see it again," that I sometimes wonder if she had any premonition of approaching fate.